Hey, I'm Guy, and that's John.
Yes, it is. Subscribe to the YouTube page, like the video. Also, subscribe to our podcast below in the description. Check it out. Do it now.
All right, Middlecoff. Kenyan Drake is
Hot.
on fire. He scored 18 touchdowns in his last 8, 14, I guess 29 games. No, he played 8 games for Arizona. So he scored 18 touchdowns in his last 23 games. That's pretty good.
It's a good ratio, Guy. Anytime that you can approach a 1-to-1 ratio for games to touchdowns is a good production, they say in the business.
Last year was 10 touchdowns in 15 games for the Arizona Cardinals, and John Gruden gave him $11 million, 11 and a half, 11 guaranteed. We were looking back. Credit to Mike Mayock. You told me Mayock had Kenyan Drake on his big board in 2016.
74th overall.
And he got drafted 73rd overall. So Mayock nailed that one.
I will say this, Guy. Every time I look at doing research on a player that the Raiders acquire and you just type in 2014, 2017, Mayock big board, he's usually pretty good. And I think this speaks to, as we'll get into Kenyan Drake, just the disconnect of, like, we have a lot of evidence of Mike. Unlike Gruden, it was more, I would say, less tangible. It was just a lot of talking. Like, he liked everybody.
Right.
It wasn't like he was doing a big board of his top 150 players. By no means was he doing that. He didn't have to because he was such a TV star. Mayock was putting his name on lists, which is what scouts and general managers have to do. And every time I go back and look, Guy, his number one interior defensive line, like, he was all over DeForest Buckner, which isn't that crazy, but he's just all over good players.
Do you have Mayock's 2016? What big board do you have right now?
I have his final. You know how he did like the top 5 rankings for every player for every position. Mm-hmm. That's what I
for what year?
Clicked off the big board and I just went 2016. His top 5 players at every position.
Okay, who's let's see. Let's find one that might be a little. Who are his top 3? Give me his top tackles in order. Do you have that?
Yes, he has Laramie Tunsil.
Okay.
Really good, right?
Yeah.
Ronnie Stanley, pretty good. Jack Conklin.
Yep.
We got paid. Taylor Decker.
Mm-hmm.
I think he got some banged up, but he got paid too. And then a guy I've never heard of, Willie Beavers.
Okay, so look, those are the top 4 guys, and he had Laramie 1. Ronnie went 1, as we know. Conklin went 2nd, and then Laramie went, and then a few picks later, Taylor Decker went. How about I don't want to spend too much time on this because we're going to talk about Kenyan Drake. Give me safety. Who's his top safety that year? This one actually might be easy. There's only one safety taken in like the first 60
Carl
picks.
Joseph.
Wait, what?
Carl Joseph, 2016.
He had Carl Joseph as number 1 safety in 2016?
Yeah. Where'd he go?
I didn't expect that.
In the teens, right? To the Raiders.
Yeah. Who do you have second? Keanu Neal?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But
onward.
But he had Dak Prescott 5 and Connor Cook and Paxton Lynch. So I'm not saying he's perfect. But ultimately, the difference is doing that exercise is you're just all positions are equal, right? You're just going top 5 at every position. You're not balancing like, well, quarterback is infinitely more important than safety. You're just listing the ranking. I think we have evidence that running back is devalued in the sense of it's hard to get a good one. Like you get a Dalvin Cook or Alvin Kamara, for example, or Christian McCaffrey. Those guys got paid, and I don't really have an issue with it. The Packers, Aaron Jones, they drafted in the middle of the draft, I think 4th or 5th round. They extended him. And when you look at the contract, they basically gave him a 1-year, $13 million deal. Now, his contract's like 4 years, 48, and people are like, oh, my God. Well, the guaranteed money is not that crazy. They used their picks on Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper, who now make a combined guaranteed money. Amari got 60, Khalil got 90, and I don't think either team has regretted it. That you used one of those picks on Josh Jacobs, and then you get Josh Jacobs, and I think everyone who's watched the Raiders go, yeah, he's one of their top 3 or 4 players. He's good. You nailed the pick. Like, it was like, should you draft Josh Jacobs that high or not? Whatever. He's fucking good. He can catch the ball. He can run inside. He can run outside. His one knock is he gets banged up because he like runs too hard. It's not like, he's just bad hammies. No, it's like he gets hurt because he runs into people. Then, like last year, and we were doing some research, we're like, well, I wonder who he liked the year before. And it was Devin Booker. He had in this class. He had Devin Booker rated way above Kenyan Drake. And who did they sign last year? Devin Booker. Why? I mean, you and I watch a lot of Pac-12. Devin Booker was really good in college. Didn't he get hurt toward the end of his career at Utah? Because I remember thinking like this guy might go in like the second round. He had an injury and he's going to go on to have, I bet when the dust settles, you're like, damn, Devontae Booker. You'll be like, Devontae Booker played 9 years in the league? Like, that's what's going to happen. And Kenyan Drake, who is just a much different player. And I believe in balancing your running units, right? You want Josh Jacobs is like having, I'm not saying he's this good, but like having a Marshawn Lynch type. Just having like a pound it, like we can go for, because Josh Jacobs has those 90-yard games. You're like, God damn, that guy dominated. And that's what an old school big physical back. Kenyan Drake is much more, you can spread it out. You can throw it to him on wheel routes. You can give it to him on pitches. So I get liking the player. They gave $11 million when one of the best players on your team, who you gave a first-round pick, who after this season you're going to pick up his fifth-year option, I just think you would use that money on all these other holes and then just go find another Devontae Booker, right? But John, I would imagine, loves this guy because why? On tape, he's scoring 18 touchdowns in 23
You can do a bunch
games.
of stuff with him, yeah. Also, maybe you're just planning to have a worse. Maybe you're planning to have a worse offensive line. Let me get me a running back that can make some plays. Not that the Cardinals' offensive line was terrible.
So you would rather just be like, let's skim on the offensive line and spend more on running backs?
1,000% I would not. Yeah. I just wonder if that's part of the thinking. This is our situation.
I bet Raiders fans like Middlekauff are just hating. I'm not. I think Kenyan Drake is good. Like, he has really resurrected his career, especially with Cliff. Well, when I watch Cliff's offense, it's a pretty spread it out offense. John's offense is a little more old school, which it works.
Yeah, but I do think a quarterback. I do think there might be some match there with Derek and this guy and Kenyan Drake, as the scouts like to say. This player,
just throw it on wheel routes and stuff.
Yeah.
Again, I don't mind the fit. I understand. The amount of money they gave him, and part of it, like if it was a no salary cap league, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But part of it is like, where are you? Well, they're getting rid of offensive linemen. They still have all these holes on defense. Part of the Raiders team that no one's talking about, the amount of pressure that is going to be on their first couple draft picks, who I'm sure are going to be on defense, is going to be high. Like, they're going to draft a middle linebacker, like pick 19 or wherever they're at, and that guy, every play is going to be like, oh, this guy's not good enough.
Plus,
right?
Ruggs is going to have a ton of pressure on him, as if he's a rookie again.
The new center is going to be like, oh, this guy's giving
and
up
Derek
sacks.
might literally have pressure on him coming from the defense.
You're saying from the defense he's playing.
That's right, because there's pressure on this offensive line now.
And who would you say is a guy that of all the good quarterbacks, who looks dramatically different when he's just under pressure, like in the league? Derek can look unreal.
Yeah.
When he's just like most good quarterbacks, like Mahomes looks normal no matter what. Derek really benefits when his offensive line is playing well. And you can be like, Middlekauff, of course he's a quarterback. I'm saying like, yeah, he kind of wilts under the pressure. We all know that. And even Raider fans are the first to admit that. And now you get rid of two of his stalwarts, especially the guy up the middle. Now you got this new center. The big part of that is the run game. And it's like, oh, I'm getting these things like PFF. The Raiders' offensive line wasn't as good. I'm not saying they are these all-world offensive line, but the chances that Gabe Jackson, Rodney Hudson's replacement, are as good as those two guys, to me, is slim to none. And you're trying now chasing a replacement when you just had those guys. That's what I can't quite understand. Because if you would have used that money on drafting another, or on another player at a position that's hard to get, I would understand it. But they kind of looks like they used it on a running back.
I know this would be the position you'd probably cross off as not at the top of your need list. But their offense might be better for it. Now, not better than it was going to be if they had re-signed their offensive lineman or not even re-signed, kept. Their offense might be better for it.
I don't know. I think how many top offenses in the league have poor offensive lines? I'm not saying they're going to have a poor offensive line.
No. Yeah, I wouldn't do that swap. No, I'm not saying their offense will be better than last year's offense. I'm just saying their offense is better today than it was the day before they signed Kenyan Drake.
I was thinking about this with Kenny Golladay and the Giants, and we talked about the receivers. If you had all this money to give, why didn't you go sign like whoever the top offensive? Your offensive line sucked last year.
Trent Williams.
But even if you couldn't get him. Just sign the top guard, a Thuney, a Corey Linsley, a center.
He went to the Chiefs.
But I'm just saying, sign one of those. Use all that money.
I
Like,
know.
you could have paid more.
Yeah.
Instead, and then draft a wide receiver just like this. Use this $11 million, allocate it somewhere else, and then use like a 3rd-round pick on a Kenyan Drake.
Who you? By the way, your GM. We're looking at this Drake and Booker. We've seen Mayock's big boards. He knows what a good running back in the 4th round looks like, right? That's that's the point.
That's where those type guys usually go.
Yeah. So I know your GM knows how to find a running back not in the 1st or 2nd round.
I think it's just a huge part of the sport of football now is, and this is my biggest knock on Gruden, because I'm not necessarily knocking on him for Kenyan Drake. Kenyan Drake's good. I enjoy watching him. I think he's a difference-making player. But to build the proper football team is about understanding and having a vision on how you want to allocate your resources. And I think everyone has to admit now, it's not really debatable that I don't know if John Gruden doesn't have a vision. His vision changes year to year. Like, he's just like that. That's just his team building philosophy is based on what happened the previous year. Not like, when coaches say, I had a set vision based on my previous experience. This is what I was going to go with. This is what I wanted to look with. Now, like any human being in any industry, you can pivot a little bit, but I don't think John has some set vision. I just can't believe it because I've watched it so closely how he's built this team. It's all over the map.
Yeah, and it feels like you just go into every year with how do we win this year? And then next year, how do we win this year? Which is understandable on one hand because the NFL is about winning now. But what happened this year does not seem to affect what happened last year from a personnel standpoint and what happened last year.
Because a huge part of it, though, was blowing it up to reset it. And it was like then to have his big vision. And then he just clearly didn't have a big vision, right? Which is, to me, the craziest part about John Gruden and the lore of John Gruden is all those years and all that time he spent at the little office in Tampa, Florida that he rented out and he had those guys come over to. And all the time he spent meeting with coaches and all the time – I'm not even talking about Monday Night Football. I'm talking about clearly he was an addict, right? He would go to coaching conferences in the offseason. He would speak at all the SEC schools. But he was just becoming this legend of like, God, Gruden's just everywhere, fucking learning and gaining all this knowledge. And I knew people like Alabama where he spent a lot of time. And you'd be like, God, he's going to have this bulletproof plan. Clearly, Saban got to Alabama, had a plan, right? Like I'll give Kyle's come to San Francisco and has had a plan. Now, it doesn't mean everything is going to work. McVay, they have a plan. I feel like I don't think John Gruden, the craziest part about John Gruden, I just don't think there's a plan. And maybe there is a plan at the end, like you said, at the end of the season for that off season. Right. But there's zero carryover of what previously happened.
I wonder if having a 10-year contract affects that in any way.
But like if you have he's so rich guy, why would he even have been worried? Like he waited all this time.
No, not worried, but just. Well, first of all, I think what you described, don't you think most of the time gets spent when coaches get together? It's about like, let's drop some plays and let's coach quarterbacks. It's not about how do we build our roster over 3 years? Like, I don't get the sense that's what Mike McCarthy was doing in his bunker when he did the bunker thing, right?
Yeah, Gruden's inclination would be driven toward the whiteboard more to
let's
like
watch
the
some quarterback film and let's just
How do you rank your guards?
Yeah. Tell me about how you filter through the practice squad special team guys.
Yeah. What's your philosophy on arm length? You're
So
right. How do you run the button hook on this play? You're right.
Do you think if I draft a running back within the next 3 years, I should spend $10 million on another running back? Right? Like that conversation.
Wouldn't you argue, or wouldn't you – argue is the wrong word. Wouldn't you assume – let's use another example of a guy that just entered the league. I would be floored if Urban Meyer hasn't had those type conversations over the years. And maybe that's different when you're a college coach.
The question is, does his college vision, does that translate to how you build an NFL team?
But I would say this for Urban Meyer, he's going to have a vision on what it looks like. I remember seeing with working for Pat Hill, he was obsessed, and part of this is just college. You're the GM, was just always working the board. Like I just don't feel like Gruden, you're right, is more inclined to go to the whiteboard.
College coaches some of them are closer to GMs than they are head coaches, right?
100%.
Urban, Pat. So maybe they are more.
I'd say.
And you're always balancing, and you have to have plans because you're always balancing scholarships over 4-year, 5-year windows, right? So you do have to plan. Yeah, well, because I'll hear it all the time. Well, Utah didn't. I've talked about it. Utah didn't take Zach Wilson. Well, yeah, because they had another guy coming in, and so they were planning for this year out. And of course, they like Zach Wilson, but it didn't fit. I talked to a coach the other day. It was basketball. They had a player transfer into their program from another Power 5 program who was from their area, right? So it's like John Middlecoff is from Sacramento, or let's pick a place that has a major. John Middlecoff's from Seattle, but he went to Nebraska, but then he transferred back to UW. What's the deal? Well, the story I got from somebody was like, well, we recruited that player, but we didn't have a scholarship for him. We wanted them to walk on, but they had full Power 5 scholarship offers, so they took that, but then they were in the portal, so they came back to us. Right? Like, you have to have a big picture plan to fit all that stuff together in college. It's a lot of administrative work.
But you don't think there's a big picture plan in the NFL with the money and the cap?
Yeah, no, of course. I'm just saying, to your point on Urban, it makes sense that Urban would have that thought, and it makes sense that is not what Gruden spent his time on.
But if you think about it, the way Gruden failed in Tampa, like a big part of it would have been like, Gruden, you're going to be a good play caller. You're going to understand offense. You need to learn the other stuff. You need to learn whenever you're going to come back, you're going to get all the power. Wouldn't you spend the time learning what you're bad at? And I think it's clear that maybe he did, but he's forgotten it all.
The other part of it is I think he hired a good GM in terms of player evaluation. Now, it's hard for us to really know who likes what, but
I'm looking at it. He had his top 3 tight ends or top 2 tight ends, Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper.